Hello, I am Joni Lorraine. I'm the program coordinator for Unity's Spiritual Direction Certificate Program, and I'm here right now with Reverend Victoria Bunch, and I'm going to let Vicki introduce herself to you. Hi, Vicki.
Hey, Joni, and hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me into your home. I am so excited to share with you a little bit of this program, but first about me. I'm a Unity minister and co-ministry with my husband at Unity of Richmond for 10 years, and then was nudged by the Holy Spirit. I was called into spiritual direction. And Joni, it's been a great adventure for me.
Can you tell us first what you define spiritual direction as, and what your experience is with growing our new program up here?
All right. For me, spiritual direction has been a journey in consciousness toward deepening my awareness of God, being intentional with my spiritual practices, and simply learning a contemplative lifestyle. I have been enriched by this direction of allowing myself to grow and develop in this contemplative way. Now, what it means for us, I believe, in our spiritual community and any spiritual community, is that it provides a cushion of non-duality, of a listening and receptiveness from all those who participate, and a readiness to walk life journeys together. That's why I call it a journey in consciousness. In spiritual direction, generally someone reaches out to a spiritual director, guide, companion, or friend. They're called all of the above, and seek some type of guidance. And so when you walk and journey in consciousness together, there's no hurry. There's no demand to have just 1 to 3 to 5 meetings. One can journey through the whole lifetime if indeed the companion and the friend just enjoy one another's company and are willing to grow together. So the whole point of bringing spiritual direction into a community is to relax in spirit, to rest in that place of peace and be in a place of wonder and mysticism of what is this journey of life all about? What is life and what is death? What is my purpose in life? What am I to do with my time? And so by journeying and talking together, truth is revealed. Companions find one another, and no one feels alone. I found that a real important benefit of being in a spiritual journey with another who will listen and ask questions without telling, without advising or counseling, just letting me struggle with my situation and to breathe into it and accept it and take on the responsibility for my spiritual life. Indeed, I went for years, Joni, and I didn't believe I was a spiritual being. I just thought I was trapped in this human condition. I had more or less moved away from my traditional Christian roots, although I had received great love from that community while I was attending as a youth. Later in life, I found that I needed to leave And it left a void in me that was not filled until I found new thought and could begin to question what is going on, moving away from the pat answers that had been given me before and the notions of original sin instead of original blessing.
Yes. There was just so much you said that is just so rich. I think one of the things that bubbled up for me that you mentioned was the journey. Can you tell us what might someone find their experience to be in spiritual direction? That is, what kind of questions do people bring to their spiritual companion? What kind of exploratory work do we do in spiritual direction?
Well, most of us like to give advice to one another where we don't listen to our own inner truth, but we're surely willing to tell someone else what we think. And so students who start in the program are guided into a way of listening through partner practices during the sessions, through the out-of-class practices with one another, simply to practice listening and not telling. It is a real eye-opener to every student to say, I don't know what to say if I can't give my opinion. How do I engage with the other person? And we just all have to laugh and be at ease with this, because spiritual direction is asking, what do you think? What is Spirit telling you? Have you taken a moment to go into the silence? Have you listened to what Spirit is saying to you? Let's take a moment and let us go into the silence. So there is some practice in every session, and there is a shared sense of, oh my gosh, I don't know how to fill the void of the quiet in spiritual direction. And once that is understood, each person begins to see in that pause, in that silence, in that moment of solitude, that's the opportunity to connect with all there is, the God of your understanding, the holy presence, and listen. And that inner listening is not easily done when we seek quick and easy answers. We want to know what to do. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. We want to just get on with it. And we live in a very fast world. So slowing down to listen is antithetical to what we're brought up to do, to get on, take it on, get your education, develop a career. What are you going to do with your life? Instead of being taught how to discern, how to listen, how not to be influenced by the outer voices, but to go inside and listen to the wisdom within.
That's just beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's very hard to do. Part of my journey has been to really understand the importance of connecting my conscious life with my unconscious desires, motives, the hidden needs that I have, anger, resentments, whatever is buried deep in the unconscious. And so in my training, I learned that there is a way through transpersonal psychology, depth psychology, integral psychology. All of those allow us to connect with that transcendent power. And it's called different names. However, it is the one, the only one, the source. So when we connect with it, it's very humbling. And we do learn gradually to take accountability for all that's hidden and say, I'm going to, as much as I can, listen to myself and the feedback of others, and I will accept what I hear, and I will take it in, and I will learn what is mine to learn. So in Jungian thought, Carl Jung was a major influence in my life and has been that guiding light, I believe, for helping us move through the darkness of a dark night of the soul and holding on to it enough to seek the light. Now, that really represents spiritual direction, I believe.
Yes. Yes, you remind me of part of my elevator speech used to be spiritual direction is bringing your head, your heart, and your spirit into congruence. It's a place to bring all of that into congruence so that what you're seeing out there matches what's going on in here. That's what your description reminded me of. That it's bringing your spiritual life into congruence with what you're seeing, and one of the ways we find that we're doing that. Something else you said in the program is in our first year, people move through an experience of formation where a student of spiritual direction. And those who practice spiritual direction, like myself and you, Vicki, we remain in spiritual direction because the process of spiritual direction is one of consistently emptying so that you can be a vessel. So that first year is that experiment and that experience in formation of emptying, as you mentioned earlier, all of those thoughts, the advice, the this, so that we can simply be a vessel for the holy to move in.
You know, that the journey of mystics have provided so much wisdom in that area. I know one of them, and I'm not sure if it was Thomas Merton or not, so please don't quote me on this, but he had a quote that God is a God of subtraction, not of addition. And our emptying, as you had beautifully said, helps me understand that subtraction, just take away obstacles that keep us from experiencing the divine and being at peace with the what is, the absolute reality that this is it and we deal with it in the here and now. So when we're empty, we're more capable of doing that, emptying of resentments or expectations or attachments. And part
Yes, so it's an emptying. I'm thinking of, you remind me of my favorite Rumi quote, yours is not to seek for love, but to remove all the obstacles to it.
Beautiful.
That. And kind of the same thing of emptying ourselves when, and it helps me to kind of segue here into this is how spiritual direction is different from counseling and therapy. is
Sure.
that this is not a fixing. It's an emptying. It's an exploration. It's
Mm.
not advice. Can you speak to the distinctions between, say, therapy, spiritual counseling, and spiritual direction for us?
Sure. So part of my background has been a master's in Bowen Family Systems, and I had a therapy practice, and children were brought to me. I worked with children and adults, and many had been abused. And it was always with the idea of fixing the child. And the therapies assumed the child was broken and would be broken and would need ongoing therapy throughout her life. I left that field because I felt the spiritual aspect was missing, and I didn't know how to weave it in necessarily. And so I went into ministry at that point. It was only in spiritual direction that I realized that the difference is in a therapeutic environment when the focus is on fixing and brokenness. In spiritual direction, the emphasis is on wholeness. The emphasis is on reminding oneself of that initial spiritual identity. That's first. And then we are in a human condition. And so now what do we do? So things happen to us. We get hurt. We hurt someone else. How do we move through that? And so people in churches are always looking for spiritual counseling. So rather than seek out a psychotherapist or a psychologist, they come to a minister, they come to a prayer chaplain, they seek out someone who'll sit and pray with them. And generally it is on an isolated incident, perhaps a death of someone in the family or a child being born into the family or something that has to do with family life. Or it could be the breakdown of the family or drug, alcohol use, or etc. But it has a specific purpose. And the minister or the person involved in the spiritual setting will work with them to resolve that issue. When you get into spiritual direction, it is a slower process and really deemed that slow work of God, where we don't necessarily have experienced an incident. We're not feeling necessarily broken, but we don't have a good fix on who we are, what is our purpose, how can we feel at ease and at peace in the world, and not be judgmental and so on. And so spiritual direction takes us into this place. So we all come in whole and we all fragment, each and every one of us. How do we get those fragments back to the whole? Well, again, we take our time and we talk and things come up from the unconscious, once again, up to consciousness where we can say, oh, let's look at that. And when you do, you take away any stigma of being bad or wrong or deficient in any way. You simply see life, oh, I've made an error in judgment. And what can I do? What will I do? What am I to do? Again, turning back to the holy presence in prayer and discernment and quiet, being in solitude for answers. So those three scenarios give people lots of support. We do need to address in therapy some of the deeper issues that won't go away. We do need to have ministers and spiritual counselors who sit with us at the time when we're most hurt. And we do need someone who will be there for the long haul. Someone you might always be able to rely on. And once you have that person, you feel like you can just breathe easier. That there's just a phone call away and there is support.
Something you said helped me to think about spiritual direction as a kind of preemptive measure to the dysfunction that we might otherwise experience. That is to say, what I've been saying as these interviews have progressed, and my definition of the distinctions between counseling and spiritual direction is that people come into counseling of some sort of or another. They might request a chaplain at a hospital. They might go to their minister. They may reach out, if they're not particularly spiritual, to a mental health counselor, but they have an issue they want to resolve. They come to you with a problem. And people who are in spiritual direction come to spiritual direction with a longing, some desire to explore. And in the exploration of that desire, all of that unconscious stuff bubbles up that is in the way of that longing, in the way of that desire. And it is more often than not, in my experience, a much gentler way to go about revealing those things that are barriers to our flourishing.
Indeed, Joni, rather than have it manifested out in the community where there's
coming out sideways
and embarrassment. And yeah. So, yes, I do understand what you're saying, because the work to bring things from the unconscious into consciousness is to mitigate the negative effects of the unconscious drives. So the more we empty, the more we share and talk and admit areas of what we're dealing with that we don't ordinarily want to talk about in coffee conversations, then we begin to realize that we're safe. We're in a safe place, safe container. And that's what spiritual direction provides.
Yes. And another thing about those distinctions that I think you can help us with here is some folks, particularly ministers, have questions around our spiritual directors and what makes us qualified, or mental health counseling, and how are we teaching our students ethics? What are we doing about those places where mental health counseling may be what is required? How do we know that? You get where I'm kind of going with this question. How does the spiritual director hold themselves in integrity, and how do we know the boundaries between our work and those of a minister and a counselor?
Yes. Let's talk about the minister first. The minister is responsible for the health and the well-being of every person that comes in, guest or congregant or board member, whoever is there. And so they need a great deal of support. I would say that, speaking for myself, I was constantly seeking the right person to turn to when an ethical issue came up in my congregation. Fortunately, I was in co-ministry with my husband, so we could talk. But I would say, first of all, every minister needs to have someone that supports them without telling them what to do. someone like a spiritual director, their own person that they can call who will help them just take it right to prayer and not tell anyone, maintain confidentiality, and allow the minister to then seek other if they need other supports. And then in the congregation, once the minister is supported first, then I believe a spiritual director can work under the guidelines of that minister with others, as long as it's agreeable to both, and there would be an understanding that there would be confidentiality unless there were any threats or any danger to anyone in the congregation, that there would be disclosure to the minister or to the police or to whoever the person would be, so that there is, number one, safety. There's physical safety, and then there's emotional safety, and then there is safety for the individual who seeks that one person in the congregation that they want to continue to grow with. And of course, we're so blessed in many of our spiritual communities to have wonderful prayer chaplains, to have wonderful prayer teams. So there are many ways to go about it, but the main thing, I believe, to maintain the ethics is to maintain the physical and the emotional safety and communication with the minister. Always working with the minister.
Gotcha. And outside of, as a general, say, private practice, what ethical guidelines do spiritual directors, what are they held to? And is there a body? Can you tell it? I have the answer to this, but the interview, would you let us know?
Yes. So there is no formal credentialing body for spiritual direction. There is an organization that does provide guidelines to us, and that is Spiritual Directors International. And it is a wonderful resource of healthy ways to be, providing workshops, providing a conference every year that is sensational, online and in person, and to gather us together to talk about some of the dilemmas that we face. So although there is no ethical body to report to, there is a source of information and a reliable group of individuals that we can turn to for support. Spiritual Directors International.
Gotcha. And when someone is looking for a spiritual director, what should they look for?
Well, I myself have looked in the past. So as you log on to and join this organization, SDI, you can seek and search for someone who has the skills, the training, the background that you are seeking. So suppose there has been, I want to say, codependency in a relationship that is ongoing, and there might be alcohol and drug use scattered throughout the family, and you just don't know who would provide that source. You can put in the actual, I want to say the actual characteristics that you're seeking, and names will come up. You can put in location, you can put in credentials, gender, types of support you want, and 3 or 4 names will come up. Now, if you can't find any, you can call SDI and their 800 number, and they will personally find you one. So you will never be without having someone that matches your needs as much as possible.
And very soon we will have several more spiritual directors available for those of us in New Thought.
Absolutely. And I would say something about these students. They are so eager to understand this contemplative way of living. It's new. It's not been part of the collective consciousness in our society. Quite the reverse. It's been hurry up and go and succeed and do well. And of course, that's wonderful. At the same time, in balance with living a life where one can listen to oneself. And it's not easily done. I have found that it's much easier for me in retirement than it has been when I was working full time. So that's what I say intentional spiritual practices. I mean, there has to be a time, a day, and a plan of how you are filled spiritually. And once you begin to see how it can fit into your very busy life, you will feel the benefits.
Yes.
That.
Is so on a first, going back to the kind of back to the previous question.
Sure.
Before I forget, what do I look for in that first visit with the spiritual director to know that I am dealing with someone I can count on?
That's great. I believe you want to make sure there is a physical comfort level, eye contact, comfortable place to be, or time of day to meet online. There must be a way that our body can speak to us in ways that our mind does not, and that we hear it. So that if our body is uncomfortable, that will not be a match, I would say. I would look for someone whose value, so my physical self is comfortable, my space is comfortable, the time of day is comfortable, and I feel as if the values expressed by the spiritual director match my values. Not necessarily asking someone to agree with me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about being non-judgmental, not giving advice, listening respectfully, and then asking me how I want to proceed with it in the silence, this or that. Really connecting with me in such a way that we're walking together. So the journeying in consciousness is all about just taking this walk together as if we're out in the forest and we're being embraced by these trees and the leaves and the sounds and the smells. And we're coming together in a heart space. So spiritual direction is very much aligned with New Thought in being a heart-centered pathway of spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit about the tactical aspects, so to speak, logistical and tactical aspects in terms of course, Can I ask if my spiritual director is in spiritual direction? Can I ask what ethics my spiritual director abides by? Are those things that are okay to explore in your first session?
Absolutely. The questions that you asked, you certainly wanting to know about the spiritual director. Now, whether they tell you the name of their spiritual director, that's optional. Generally, I do not. I say I have my own spiritual director. I have a peer supervision group. I also have continuing education, and that I'm constantly growing in the field. And so I offer that information about myself, and that way it still puts the responsibility on the shoulders of the person who enters this spiritual direction relationship. I do my part, and I'm here to support you doing your part. How can I help you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You remind me that I think that spiritual direction may be one of the more collegial spiritual relationships. It's not as tiered, if you will, as a minister, congregant, or a therapist. There are power dynamics, but the differential is a little bit different with a spiritual director because the source of the guidance in the room is neither the director nor the directee. It's the holy.
It's the whole. It's the body, the mind, the spirit. It's everything that comes together that is a spiritual moment.
Yes.
So, yes, indeed. I just think the word egalitarian may apply, but it's really a way of going beyond seeing the world through the eyes of a PhD or a master or someone who has qualifications of this. It's really connecting. I'm a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being. Let's talk. And when you empty yourself of, she thinks she's all that, well, then it allows you to just be totally free, just free to say, I'm a soul and I'm on this journey, and I am worthy of having lots of support. I am worthy of having someone listen to me.
Mm. Gosh,
and
that's beautiful.
It plays out that there are some groups who feel as if you go to a psychotherapist, then you have something wrong with you. And, or there's no health coverage to cover a therapeutic ongoing relationship. Whereas spiritual direction is one that can be affordable. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be shared. The fees are always, I would say, very practically decided upon, so that there is no reason to stay away. There's every reason to come together and in a place of trust. Robert Bromett and a group of us many years ago were talking about how we had all gone to different spiritual direction schools. Why don't we bring in spiritual direction into our unity movement? And those conversations go back years. And finally, as they have come into fruition, we have really understood how much an alignment spiritual direction is with this movement of new thought that embraces so many different groups. And it's just a beautiful collegial way of saying your group is, although you use different words to worship than my group, we're all coming together in this place of oneness. And so when the recommendations were made to the board to move into, to bring a spiritual direction program into Unity, it was just a moment of delight for many of us. And to see it come this far, Joni, it has been just a breath of fresh air. And so your program and your vision has matched what we were seeking from the original tiny group, and you're taking it places that we hadn't even expected.
Oh, I hope that's a compliment.
It is. I want you to know that. Really, I mean it. I mean it.
I get it. I just being self-deprecating. This is a great segue into how the program started. Tell us more about that.
Well, we had Reverend Robert Brummett was our team leader, who he himself is a spiritual director. He was also a ministerial seminary instructor for many years. He also has a background in Buddhism and interspiritual thought and consciousness studies. And so when he began to talk with others about it, including me, I listened to that, and yet I didn't hear it for years. And then my husband was board chair for a year, and he could see how thrilled I was with my program, that we began to organize. And so a group came together and the talking ensued. And then Robert gave us all tasks to research and bring back to the larger group. And eventually it was presented in a package to the board, and they accepted it. And then we brought you on as program coordinator. And then I don't know how you've done it, but we have classes now, and I'm thrilled to be part of the one of the instructors and teaching the art and ministry of spiritual direction. The tools are beautiful, and the students are so eager.
Tell us about them. What kind of student? What kind of person? What kind of person is drawn to being a spiritual director? What kind of students are you seeing? What kind of people are you seeing drawn to this program?
Yeah, I hear the word, and you used it earlier, longing. Those who are longing to deepen their awareness of the divine and how it shows up in their lives, and how they're longing to be at a greater place of peace with all the chaos around us. They're longing to know how to serve others in this way, and to be that agent of peace. And it includes ministers, and it includes every person that's within the spiritual community. We have teachers, we have coaches, we have anyone who is in the helping profession, nursing or social work, all of those who seek to help others first come in to heal whatever residual work needs to be done in their life. And just to take it on, to look at it and have that self-awareness and to heal. And then move into seeing how spiritual direction can be used individually or in a group, or providing workshops, prayer workshops, or supports to others in the community. There are so many different ways to use it, and there's not just one. So each person gets to decide. But the basic element that brings someone in, I believe, is the longing to have a deeper relationship with the God of their understanding.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
How can those students, once they have a certificate, how can those of us who are already spiritual directors, how can we support ministries and ministers and grow communities? I think that's the question. Basically, is how can we as spiritual directors support ministers and ministries?
I really appreciate that question. I've given it a lot of thought. Those of us who are now becoming certified, have been certified for years, do some work with individuals and so on. I believe that if we begin to reach out to our regions, our individual ministers, and ask for I want to say just a conversation, time for a conversation, and develop a sheet that says who you are, what you do, send a picture, provide a little bio, give information freely to others with the desire to be a part of communities in the life of the ministry, and ask for an appointment. I believe that we will eventually become known, and becoming known, we will become trusted. So we've got to first step forward, especially our first cohort and the second cohort. Some are ministers, some are already in the youth program or the prayer chaplain program, and they are established in their church, but they might also want to reach out to other churches that don't have anyone that will walk side by side with others for a long period of time. So we're looking for both. We're looking for ways to be of service. We're also looking for ways to ask people to trust us in this work that we're doing. So I believe it's going to take some initiative, taking it on, put the mantle right on yourself, and declare that you are ready to listen and to love others in respectful ways, and to always work with the ministers of whatever group or directors of any organization that you might work with. Always to coordinate with them in respectful ways. And I believe it will be safe. It will be a happy experience, and one that is lighthearted. In a world where we see so many problems, let us just shed that way of looking at the world and look at the way that we can be whole and see wholeness and bring it forth in our prisons and in our schools and in our churches, wherever we are, that we can be that beacon of pulling forth that wholeness of who we really are, and then move beyond that which we are not. And that's the emptying and the shedding and moving beyond that.
Yes.
It's a transformative way of working within oneself and then spreading that message to others. But I do believe in a world that has been told that we're sinful and that we're bad, that we need to correct that understanding somehow, some way, and simply see our goodness. Our basic goodness is our spiritual self. So we have work to do in that realm. Really claim who we are, and then go out and be it. Be the light for yourself and someone else. And I was going to say, I don't think that we're going to remedy anything in the outer world until we get this, that we have that power to shift our own consciousness and to journey with others to help them shift.
What can a church body, in alignment with what you've just spoken to, what can a church body or a minister count on in terms of the benefits of congregants being in spiritual direction? How does this work support a whole ministry?
Well, Joni, I think, and this is not really tested yet from my way of, from my ministry, but I do believe that it can be to bring us closer, that we don't just come in for some fellowship twice a year and stay home, that we're actually growing together and we're talking about how we're growing and we're building that energy. So I believe that our spiritual communities will be strengthened, that we'll want to serve even more when we see the benefit of our own growth and how our own energy comes up, our vibration level comes up, the quieter we are. We don't need to be going about yelling and always talking with people. It's simply the beingness where the vibration comes up and seeing one another truly from a soul level, and the vibration goes up. So I believe that's one of the ways that our communities will thrive, that we will feel our own self strengthened and a greater place of peace. I look forward to that. And so I can't measure it from my own work now, but I'm planting seeds in the minds of students all the time to see what they want and allow it to grow. Plant those seeds.
What would you offer to the skeptical minister in terms of the opportunity to welcome a spiritual director?
I would certainly understand a skeptical minister who may have had an experience in the past where there was some congregational confusion, some splitting, one group pulling away, or any type of fragmentation within the church body. So if I knew that about the minister, I would say, how can I be here for you? And let me be here and listen to that experience in you. And perhaps we can talk about being a part of the congregation in the future, but may I be here for you? And just asking permission. And if they choose not to share, then that's fine. You know, sometimes we heal on our own. We journal, we pray, we listen, and we do our own work. Sometimes we do better sharing it with others. I find that it moves away quicker when we can verbalize it, articulate it in a safe environment, and let it just dissolve. However, we all have our own timelines. But I would say the beauty of spiritual direction is there is no hurry. We're on an eternal journey. We are eternal beings in energy, no matter how we envision it manifest. And we can always just relax into it and say, I'm here for you. If you do need me, please do call. So there is a recognition and respect for whatever's occurred in the past. And whenever there are deep wounds in a community, it does take a while for that to heal. So being, in whatever way, a support or not, to be okay.
Yeah.
That's the grace of it. That's the grace of it. You know, spirit is always present, whatever is going on. So we have no fear. We have no fear that healing is not happening. We just don't understand why, how, and where. We let go. It's not ours to do. Not ours to fix, for sure.
So is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, let me go back to sort of the work with students. I would say that for me, spiritual direction has been a godsend in helping me be more aware of myself and others. It's one thing to read concepts and to agree with them and come into the heart space with them. It's another thing to practice them, to be aware. I just said something that I'm shocked over the fact that I said that, and either work it through with the other or take it into my own private practice, spiritual practice. But the awareness is how we grow. And so staying in awareness of ourselves first and foremost as spiritual beings, then we can say, in this human condition, I need to be as aware as possible for my own benefit, for my own peace of mind, and also not to cause harm to others. And when I do, I apologize if I can, or if not, I simply release it into the love of the universe. But I would say the greatest gift we can give ourselves and someone else is awareness. And so, hence, spiritual direction has been that special form of ministry that I adore and will continue to practice and promote. Thank you, Joni. Thank you for allowing me to have this moment with you.
Wow.
We are so akin in our passion for this program.
Yes, and you have provided us with some jewels in the crown of our spiritual direction program. So I appreciate you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop our recording.